When thinking of rock and roll, a few bands might come to mind. Led Zeppelin, Queen, Pink Floyd, just to name a few. However, one band might come to mind. A band that stands atop all the rest, in my opinion. That band is called AC/DC. Angus Young was the youngest sibling out of 8 children. He was born on March 31st, 1955 in Glasgow, Scotland. And his family was pretty much known for playing music. His brother Stephen could play the piano and accordion. His other brother John could play the guitar. Angus Young decided that he wanted to learn guitar, so he took up some lessons from his brother Alexander. Until he was hit by a car. He moved to Australia at 8 years old because it was reportedly to have a really bad winter. Which actually happened, by the way. It did clock in at negative 2.2 Celsius. Angus dropped out at the age of 15 because he really only enjoyed band and art class. Angus Young worked various jobs after high school, such as he worked at a publishing company, a butcher shop, a printer shop, and a magazine shop. And then in 1973, Angus Young would make a decision that pretty much changed his whole life, basically. Him and Malcolm Young created AC/DC. They added 3 other guys, 2 of which I literally cannot pronounce if my life depended on it, and Dave Evans on the vocals. Kinda Next to Your Girl was recorded as the band's first single. Dave Evans later quit the next year and was replaced with Bon Scott. They would later re-record everything that Dave Evans did with Bon Scott. And then the High Voltage album would release in 1976 that would change everything, with hit songs such as TNT and It's a Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll and Jailbreak. There was an LP released before that called TNT that released exclusively in Australia, but is really well known if you're an AC/DC fan. And they were getting ready for their first concert, but they needed some costumes. And then Angus's sister recommended a schoolboy look, and she told the press that Angus was born in 1959 instead of 1955. Shortly after releasing Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap in August 20th, 1976 this time. At this point, AC/DC was still kind of underground, but they were working their way up. Over the next few years, they would release Let There Be Rock, Power Age, and If You Want Blood, You've Got It, before releasing their 22 times platinum album, Highway to Hell was released in 1979 and sent shockwaves throughout the rock community. Not only was this album really, really good, but it proved how good AC/DC's chemistry was. And proved that they weren't just messing around, they were having fun and just doing what they wanted. And it seems like AC/DC was at the right place at the right time too, since rock was pretty much reaching its peak by then. With a 22 times platinum album, die-hard fans, a great band with experienced players, only the worst could ruin it. And the worst ruined it. In February 19th of 1980, Bon Scott died of alcohol poisoning. Before Bon Scott's death, Bon told them about Brian Johnson, who was the singer of another band that Bon Scott played in before AC/DC. And so after one song audition, they chose Brian Johnson as their new singer and recorded their most popular song to date. Back in Black was released internationally on July 25th, 1980, and it served as a tribute album to Bon Scott. And it was said that it was recorded and finished in only 6 weeks. But AC/DC was facing a problem after this. Their songs just weren't reaching the level of mainstream that they were with Bon. For literally the entire 80s, no one had a thought of AC/DC. They released 5 albums. Each failed to break more than 10 million copies, while Back in Black released over 50 million copies in the first year. And so at this point, it's sliding into the 90s, and nobody really knows what to do. Well, Angus's brother Steven unfortunately passed away in 1989. It was all cut and dry for AC/DC. They had one final chance. They were no longer having that young person energy, since it was weird to dress up as a schoolboy as a 35-year-old. So they released one album in 1990. And oh boy, I'll just let you hear it for yourself. This song might sound familiar. What is argued to be the best AC/DC album ever, The Razor's Edge, was released in 1990 and reached 5 times platinum 4 times over and sold over 12 million copies in the first month of its release. Issue with that is after that, AC/DC would never reach the same level of popularity again. They did have some good tours though, and their performance in Moscow was the 7th most attended concert in history. The band would only get less popular through the next 3 albums they released in the 90s. They did release one album in 2002 that reached some level of popularity. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2003, and well, that's where most of the AC/DC stories end. Black Ice released in 2008, and well, that's the last time AC/DC really came out with any mainstream attention. In 2011, they became the 5th band to sell the most albums, and even did some of the soundtrack for Iron Man 2. In 2012, Angus Young was deemed the best Australian guitarist of all time. In 2014, Malcolm Young would drop out, as well as Phil Rudd, and Steve Young took over for Malcolm Young. However, on November 18th, 2017, Malcolm Young passed away because he got really ill. Doctors said that Brian Johnson's hearing got so bad that he'd either have to stop performing or lose his hearing entirely. On September 30th, 2020, AC/DC tweeted out that they were going to release their new LP with all the members that were still alive, I guess. And that's pretty much where the story leaves off. And that's why there will never, ever be another Angus Young. Ever. He quite literally created history. I idolize him not just because he was a great guitarist, but also a great person in general. He was always there when people needed him, and I respect that. As someone who uploads once a month, I can safely say that it is hard to be there whenever people need you. So to everybody watching this video, thank you.